So it's going to be recorded, and it will be, I'll send out the link as soon as it becomes available. Is anybody else joining us? Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the screen sharing. PowerPoint slideshows are available. If you would, it will be uploaded to Facebook, our Facebook group, and then also I will send it out to anybody who emails me and asks for it. Are we ready, steady, go? Here we go. So the moon, everything you didn't know about her. Welcome, everybody. There we go. So, okay, so here's the agenda. Something that Spencer and I talked about, and I decided to, and I suddenly remembered it. We don't really talk about astrological events. So what I want to do is try to give you an event calendar for what's coming up between this meetup and our next meetup. I'll talk a little bit about the science of the moon and where she came from. Tahia is going to talk about the Vedic perspective. Then we're going to switch over to Spencer, who's going to be going through some of the keywords, how to put the pieces together. We've got some charts, interesting charts to look at. And then I'll maybe talk about some cycles and phases. We want to have time for questions and answers, and we'll do a little wrap up and talk about what's coming up next month. Next month is going to be, should be quite interesting because we're going to be talking about containment. Who's in the middle? You got a stellium, somebody's in the middle. Who's in the middle, and what's the effect of that? How does that affect the planet? Okay, so here's what's coming up, folks. What is today? The 9th? Okay. Tuesday, May 11th, we have a new moon, 21 Taurus 18. On Thursday the 13th, 3:36 p.m., Jupiter returns to Pisces. Now, this is the first time he's been in Pisces since 2011, joining Neptune. Now, Neptune is the current ruler of Pisces. Jupiter was the old ruler, and this is the first time both of them have been in Pisces since 1855-56. The last time they were both in Pisces. Friday the 14th, moon wobble starts. It's also then later on Friday, Mercury enters the shadow, 16 Gemini, 7 minutes, 37 seconds, give or take a couple. May 20th, the sun enters Gemini. May 23rd, Saturn goes retrograde. That gives us 2 retrograde planets. May 26th, we have a super full moon total lunar eclipse at 5 Sagittarius. So that's the first of 4 eclipses for the year. And on May 29th, Mercury will station retrograde. Now we're up to 3 retrograde planets. So there's going to be a retrograde. From this point, once Pluto went retrograde end of April, we're going to have at least 1 planet retrograde for the rest of the year. June 2nd, Venus is going to enter Cancer. June 10th, we have a new moon solar eclipse at 19 Gemini 47. So mark those down in case they decide to play with your chart. Obviously, there's a lot of other stuff going on, but you know what? I didn't put it all in there, but this and other stuff is covered in my weekly look ahead. So anybody got any questions about any of these events? Okay, we're good to go. Here we go. So where did the moon come from? There are a variety of theories as to the origin of the moon. Currently the most widely accepted is it resulted from the giant impact where a large Mars-sized planetoid type object struck the Earth early on in its formative years, like when we were probably, the Earth was less than 500 million years old. It struck the Earth. The 2 cores of the 2 objects combined together, but there was a lot of debris thrown off, and that debris then coalesced and became the moon. Now, this other planetoid object, if she existed, has been named Thea, who is the Greek goddess um, she's the mother of Selene, the moon goddess in Greek astrology. So it's an interesting story. Somewhere, and I was trying to find it again. I haven't been able to find it. I ran across a tribal myth, and I think it was from a Native American tribe, where that was their mythology as well, was that the moon was formed when something else struck the earth. And I find it interesting how so often science ends up confirming some of these ancient myths that the tribes have, such as the Dogon tribe in Africa and their mythology of coming from a sister star to Sirius, star that nobody knew existed until they developed telescopes. So, as above, so below. Some of the other theories, the moon formed separate from the Earth and was captured by the Earth's gravity when she passed close by. The moon was formed from debris cast off by the rapidly spinning Earth. And as a result, because of the moon, the Earth's rotation has slowed down. Or the moon was formed by the debris cast off by thousands of collisions by early asteroids and other bodies with the forming Earth. So there's a variety of theories on where the moon came from. The similarities between the moon's surface and Earth lead them to believe that they were connected at some early point. But so they're still working on it. The facts that we do know, the moon is real. It's not made of cheese. We've been there. She always shows the same face toward the Earth. So like any good celebrity, she has her good side, and that's the side she shows to us. That's the side you photograph from. Because her rotation, yeah.
Cornelia is in the waiting room now, she says.
Oh, goody, goody. Okay, hang on, here we go. 3 people entered. We got 3 people in the waiting room. Okay, view. Admit all. There we go. We got some others in there too. All right, yay. Thank you.
Many. Oh, good. They let me in.
Hi.
Here we are.
There we go. Welcome. Well, you haven't really missed that much. I was just talking about where the moon came from.
Okay, great.
Current theory is she was formed when another body struck the Earth, or the Earth and this other body called Thea merged together. The debris that was kicked off became the moon. So I think one of the key things to remember about the moon is that she rotates on her axis at basically the same rate that she orbits the Earth. So the same face or side of the moon is always directed towards the Earth. We never see the backside, dark side, the other side. Okay, so that basically covers what I was going to talk about. And I'm going to turn it over to our Vedic astrologer, and then when she's done, she'll give it back to me. Once I figure out how to do this. Okay, so I'm going to, I stopped sharing. There we go. That helps. Let's see where, oh, there you are. Where'd you go? Oh, moving.
There I am.
Yes, I know, you gotta keep up on this. Okay, here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There you are. Are you ready, Tia?
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the screen share.
Yeah, there you go. Technology. Hi, Cornelia. Glad you could make it. Sorry for the troubles. Anybody else in the waiting room? Okay. Looking for cats here.
Oh, okay, I think I got it, Jim.
Okay.
Alrighty, can folks let me know when you can see the screen?
I see it.
Okay, super. All right, well, thank you, Jim. My name is Tahia Amir. I'm a Vedic astrologer. If anybody joined last month, I presented the foundations of Vedic astrology. And today, Jim kindly asked me to share the Vedic aspect on the moon. So I'm going to present some slides and talk about the moon in Vedic astrology. And kind of the approach I'm going to take is using the moon as a reference point, talking about what I call the mother wound, and then some examples. Can you guys hear me, or is there an echo?
Yes.
Jim, you're on mute. I don't know if folks can hear me or if there's an echo.
Yeah, there was, I guess some are getting a little bit of an echo.
Okay.
Maybe, I don't know if you turn your mic up a little bit. The volume seems a little low for me, but
Yeah, one sec. Let me check the mic.
I'm getting hard of hearing in my old age. What can I say?
Yeah, no worries. You're fine.
We can hear you fine.
We're good. All right.
All right. Is that better? Okay, thanks. I see a thumbs up. All right, so what do I mean by the moon as a reference point? I'm talking about something called the dignity of the moon, which is, what house the moon is in. Is it a friend to the moon? Is it an enemy to the moon? Then I look at the Lord, something called the Lord of the house that the moon is in, which is really kind of the dominant force that's going to dictate how the moon and the person feels. Then the fourth house. So the fourth house is commonly, known as the reference point as the mother. The reason I'm pointing it out as a separate reference point is because the moon isn't always in the fourth house. So in other words, the moon could mean the mother, but the moon isn't always in the fourth house. So we've got to look at two aspects. Then I look at what's called the Lord of the fourth house, the moon's nakshatra, which is the constellation and stars in Vedic astrology, and the Lord of the moon's nakshatra. So I'm kind of peeling the layers here. And for those of you that Vedic astrology is new, I'll try to give as much as a base as I can.
Yeah, you're having an audio issue here.
Oh, I am? What's the issue?
It was kind of like starting to echo and break up a little bit.
Oh, good Lord. Okay. Can you hear me now? I'm
Yeah,
not really
you're good.
sure what's going on.
I'm not yet.
Okay.
I don't know if it's just me, but yeah, you're good.
Oh, feel free to interrupt if you get an audio issue. I thought I worked on it because that was the feedback last time, but anywho, all right. And then looking at the moon with the nodes, the south and north node of the moon, and finally transits. So as you can see, this is pretty heavy in terms of just looking at one planet. So in the big picture of doing a chart reading, we would do this for all planets, which gives you a very in-depth chart reading of the person. But again, I'm just going to focus on the moon since that's the kind of agenda for today. So the moon, this is really speaking to the dignity of the moon and what it is. I think what would help too is if folks aren't speaking, if they could put themselves on mute, that would probably eliminate some of the background noise. The moon in Vedic astrology is exalted at 3 degrees Taurus. And what that means is it does its best there. This is a great position for the moon in which it's its high point. The moon exactly. Well, this in sense means that the person tends to be a little bit more, almost, I would say, introverted and tends to do a lot more of the deep thinking analysis, to get to other layers. It is not by saying when a planet is debilitated that it's in a sort of the bad guy. It just takes a different turn to get to another layer of life. So there's a lot of more introspective work done when a planet is debilitated to really get to more of a spiritual purpose. When a planet tends to be exalted, it does really well, and it also does well on a material level. The moon's own sign is actually Cancer. Sorry, that's a typo there, not Taurus. In Sanskrit, the moon is called Chandra. It owns Monday, that's the day of the week. It's strongest in the 4th house, which is reflective of the mother. And then what does it really mean? It means, you know, like I just said, it's reflection, intuition, it's our mind, our conscious security, it's home. It's the ability to feel needed, wanted, nourished. And when the moon is in a disturbed place or in a difficult place, the mind tends to be impacted. And it deals with, you know, water. So it has to do a lot with water retention. In general, anything that has fluid and is nurturing. And as you can see, I've listed some medical things here that it's related to as well. And I'm not going to really focus on the medical here. I'm mostly going to focus more on the psychology of the moon. And then the 4th house. So the 4th house, in essence, is known to reflect the mother. You know, the 4th house is the karaka, or what we call significators of the 4th house, which are planets that do really well there are the moon and Venus. The sign is Cancer, and the body part again is the breast and the heart. It represents security we gain through the mother, our sense of happiness when we feel secure, foundation, our root, and it really deals with heart energy, which essence is receiving love. It deals with fixed assets, such as homes, cars, any type of luxury items, real estate. The 4th house is also a house that indicates if someone asks about moving, and it deals with education and also memorization, because the moon, it deals with the mind. So it is, and it's also the 4th house is considered a powerhouse because it's an angle. And then I thought I'd just kind of go through the moon in different houses and kind of talk about the pluses and minuses of each. And minuses really meaning, you know, what the challenges and limitations can be. And this always depends on any type of aspect to the moon, if the moon is with a node, things like that. So if the moon is in the 1st house, you know, the person tends to be very sensuous, has a love of beauty, really wants a kind of, seeks a lot of change. And this is because the mind and body tend to be one. The 1st house is the ascendant, which is the body, and the moon is the mind. So in the 1st house, the moon, the mind and the body can kind of complement each other and almost like reach the same plane. On the flip side, you know, when the moon is in the 1st house, there's a lot of mood swings. The person tends to change their mind a lot, can kind of go from a low to a high, just is always flip-flopping. There's lots of highs and lows, mood swings, and they tend to be spending a lot of money, but at the same time, they can be very frugal and then go to the other extreme, which is very lavish. When the moon is in the 2nd house, you see that this focuses on family, finances, that they tend to like new clothes. That one I kind of just got from a Vedic astrology who was a tutor of mine. It's not really in any per se books. You know, it kind of focuses on the face as well. And just in general, whatever house the moon is in, you're going to find fluctuation when it's not in good dignity and when it has harsh aspects. So it's almost like, you know, I'm saying as a plus, you can almost flip it for the minus. So in the same time in the 2nd house, finances, which is the 2nd house matter, can fluctuate. So it can go up and down. Speech can also, you know, be impacted. And because it's a representation of the mother, you can tend to lose finances or gain finances depending on the dignity through the mother. The third house, what does the third house stand for? Travel, it's, you know, our challenges, it's our siblings. So when the moon is here, the mother tends to be like a friend or a sibling to the person. You know, they've got an active mind, they're very quick thinking, they're also artistic because the third house is our hands. And then on the flip side, the moon is unfocused. You know, this person travels a lot, they move a lot, they don't necessarily plan. When the moon is in the fourth house, this is where it likes to be. So it's motherly, it's nurturing, they enjoy sort of a nice home. There's lots of security here. And then on the flip side, it can be oversensitive, a lot of emotional ups and downs and problems with the mother. The fifth house is a sign of creativity, of children, of romance. It's an intellectual house. It's a spiritual house. So as you can see, this is all about romance, meditation, spirituality. It's also an investment house. It's a sports house. So the flip side is that the person can focus on one too many things. They can be reckless as you know, that kind of floors into gambling. Excuse me. When the moon is in the sixth house, this is the house of healing. So this provides service. This is a lot of healing and nurturing. It's also the house of pets, and they tend to have supportive employees. And I say this because the sixth house can be your known enemies. This can also be problems with the mother because the sixth house is the house of enemies. Somebody wants to be admitted. There's, you know, problems with employees, and sorry, people want to keep getting admitted. And this is enemies you know about. And, you know, because of this, it can also cause the person to be mentally imbalanced because this is a healing house. And then the seventh house is partnerships, both romance and business. So the mother can be a partner here. They tend to be drawn to pleasures and benefits from the partners. When it's not in a good dignity, the person can tend to be in multiple relationships, have wandering eyes, and they tend to find partners that need a lot of nurturing. So it's always that person that, you know, can either not have a mother in their life, not have a good relationship with their mother, so they look for that in their partner. When the moon is in the eighth house, this is somebody who's intuitive, kind of always looking for the unknown and what's unbeknownst to them, what's foreign, is a researcher, and it's also gains from their partner because it's second to the seventh house. And the flip side is that they are distant from the mother. Mother can be, and that can mean just not physically, but, you know, the eighth house is also a house of death. So this can mean the mother just may not be in their life, either because of death or for other kind of mental, psychological, or spiritual reasons. They can also go to sexual extremes. They're jealous, and they can be emotionally imbalanced. The ninth house is a house of philosophy and religion. So the moon here tends to also, you know, have that focus. It also brings an emotional father, and it can be ups and downs with the father as well. Because this is opposite the third house, this is also a travel house, but more for long distance travels. And because this is the natural house of philosophy, religions, beliefs, and dogmas, there can be inconsistencies here if the moon is in trouble. The 10th house, the moon brings status here. The moon brings fame. And then the flip side is that it can bring fame, but maybe not in the way the individual wants. And the 11th house is the house of gains, networking, opportunities. People here the moon here can tend to give fluctuations in these types of opportunities, ups and downs in friendships. Friends tend to come and go. It could be fair weather friends here. And lastly, the 12th house is a charitable house. So this is where, you know, guys, if you could put yourself on mute, that would help. Thank you. This is a house of just volunteering, charities, spiritual pursuits. The 12th house, a house of loss, can be the mother's not available again, overly sacrificing mother, and feels like you don't do enough, or you're always alone and confined, as well as just losses in money. So that's kind of the moon in the different houses. Any questions so far? Okay, take silence is golden. The moon through the different signs. And again, sort of the same idea as the previous slides I went through with pluses and minuses. You can always sort of see the flip side of things if there's harsh aspects here. And the way you look at this is, the moon in Aries, Aries is ruled by Mars. So that's what's going to give the moon color here. So, on one side, the person is going to be very fiery, spontaneous like Mars, quick decisions, passionate, aggressive, really can take the ball and run with it. But then on the opposite end, they tend to be judgmental, impatient. They tend to be starters, but not necessarily finishing things. And they can be prone to accidents because that's what Mars is as well. The moon in Taurus, Taurus is ruled by Venus. All things Venusian, finer things in life, sensuality, beautiful, supportive. And then on the other side, they're overindulgent, over generous, and can be inconsistent because of wanting so many indulgences in life. The moon in Gemini, ruled by Mercury. So do things with their hands, communications, creativity, clever. And then on the flip side, they can be cunning, overcommitted, a multitasker, not, focused on multiple things and not necessarily honed in. The moon in Cancer, where it likes to be, is sensitive, emotional, affectionate, very nurturing, a mother to everybody. And then on the flip side, they can be very attached to somebody, very dependent, and therefore submissive, always kind of looking out for others, susceptible to their problems, kind of always find people who just constantly need mothering. And then the moon in Leo, Leo's ruled by the sun. So this person likes to be in charge. They tend to be a go-getter as well, very generous, ambitious, kind of a climber. They tend to be, because it's about the sun, it's about themselves. So they're selfish, arrogant, they have to be bossy. They tend to take offense easily. Virgo, another Mercury ruled planet, this is the Virgin. So they tend to be very feminine and also very just analytical and very precise. They have good memories and they're always very defined in their action. And then the flip side is that, they're overly critical. They tend to over idealize and they're just very kind of, this is the OCD type of person. And again, guys, these are just sort of the colors I'm giving things. There's always shades of lighter grays here. This is not black or white by any means. And then if we look at Libra, again, another Venus ruled planet, Venus ruled sign. Libra rules the politician. So we're looking here at people who really know how to speak. These are your diplomats. These are your people who can, just by their voices, are very persuasive. They're great negotiators. And then at the same time, they can be manipulative because they want to please everybody. They tend not to please everybody. And so there's not a lot of direction in what they're doing. They tend to be a little bit devious and they can, be a chameleon. They can just wear all different colors depending on the room they're in. The moon in Scorpio is another Mars ruled sign. So this person, again, is action oriented because this is an 8th house type of thing, looking to make changes, transformation, tends to like to face adversity alone. And then, they're also on the other side, hold a lot of emotional attachment. They self-isolate, they hold on to grudges, they're overly sexed. Sagittarius is the natural 9th house, stands for beliefs, philosophy, very self-righteous sign, very dogmatic. They tend to argue just because they want to defend their beliefs versus seeing everybody's side. Very restless in that sense and aggressive. Capricorn, a Saturn ruled planet, is pragmatic. They tend to do things with a lot of with a methodology. They're very consistent. They like old things because this is Saturn. Institutions are old things. So they tend to gravitate towards that. They can come off because of that a little bit cold, very goes by the book, dogmatic, and kind of can be the oddball out. And then Aquarius is your visionary, somebody who's very inventive, the philosopher, always thinking of the future, the next step outside of the box. And as a result, they tend to be guarded because of that, because it's not always accepted well by those around them. They don't really like things like cults because they don't necessarily conform. So these are really your non-conformists who kind of think out of the box, really. And then Pisces is a Jupiter ruled planet. So this is spiritual, very devoted. And then really because this is symbolized by the fish with two different directions, they lack boundaries. And so they tend to be impulsive, not really, depending on the sign and where it is, or the dignity of this, they can also just think without saying things. Again, that's a boundary issue. So that is some of, the moon in the different houses, as well as the different signs. So any questions so far? Okay, just gonna keep going. So the Lord of the Moon and the Lord of the fourth house kind of tells you about the moon itself, as well as the direction and the relationship the person has with the mother. And we'll get a little bit to this when we go through into some examples. The moon's nakshatras. So nakshatras are unique to Vedic astrology. They really they're referred to as the 27 wives here. There's a lot of mythology around this, and the moon spends a day with each nakshatra. And it's really determined by the position of the moon at birth. And what this tells us is another emotional landscape of how the person thinks. And, these are very specific depending on the time the person is born in. And it can just give a lot of color to the person's mind and emotional well-being. Okay. And then when we talk about aspects to the moon, we're looking at, and I know this is a little bit different from tropical astrology, but our Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, the north and south moon aspecting the moon, and what does that mean? Is it actually expanding how the person thinks, or is constricting? Is it giving them more fire? Is it giving them some sort of obsessions? Is it making them feel isolated? And then we do the same type of thing to the fourth house. So every time we sort of add these layers, it just gives us a bigger and more colorful picture of what the person is. And then there's something I wanted to talk about just called the mother wound. This is really, again, depends on the aspects to the moon, as well as something as the moon is with the north or the south node. When the moon is with Rahu, Rahu is a serpent in Vedic astrology, and it's really it's not a planet, it's 2 points. And, the top is Rahu and the bottom is Ketu. And again, this is a lot of mythology that's involved here in understanding this. And if there's time, I can get into that. But really, when the moon is with the north node, the mother can have addictions. And this can be anything from, we're talking shopping, alcohol, drug, just any type of addiction, because what is an addiction? It's just obsessions with your thoughts and thinkings, and, you're coping with it in not the most healthy way. When the moon is with the south node, the mother is somehow missing. This can mean a sense of abandonment. Just the mother doesn't make the child a priority in their life. Just the person just feels that they've been neglected and rejected. And, not to say that one is worse than the other, but the moon with Ketu tends to give problems that, because they're not on a physical plane, and I'm not saying by any means addiction is, but because this tends to be really something deep in a person's psyche, it tends to be something the person needs a lot of help or years to get through to kind of navigate their way from these type of issues. And then there's something called Gadanta. Gadanta is having the moon or any planet actually, in the last 3 degrees of a fire sign, and the last 3 degrees of a water sign, and the first 3 degrees of a fire sign. And when this happens, the person usually, nothing's 100%, doesn't have a relationship with their birth mother. So they can be adopted. They're raised by somebody who's not their birth mother, an aunt, a grandmother, a stepmother, but this is just like another thing that is a part of the moon psychology. Okay, and then transits from the moon. So this is really how Vedic astrology looks at transit, not just from the rising sign, but also the moon. So in other words, we take the moon and we make the moon the ascendant or the rising sign, just for conversation's sake. And we look at those transits from the moon to understand the psychology of what's going on. And transits from the moon tend to be more about really the emotional psyche, where transits from the actual rising sign or the ascendant are what materializes for the person. So there's a difference here, which is why we look at both. And when there's similarities between the rising and the moon, it's called confluence, and that can help with predictions. Now, for example, if the person has the moon in the ascendant, so in other words, the rising sign has the moon in it, it's much more powerful, those transits, because they're taken from the same place, and it's almost a double whammy. So that is kind of was my little foundation. Are we doing okay with time, Jim?
Here, I would, yeah. You got a couple of minutes to go through some examples if you want.
Okay, I'll go through one example then, because I definitely don't want to hijack your meeting. So I am going to go through Prince Harry, who is, just because of what's been going on in the media. These aren't my personal views by any means. This is sort of just what I've observed. So I'm just going to share this. And what I did was I put here the Vedic chart for Prince Harry, as well as the tropical charts. So you can see there's some differences. And mainly, if you look here, the rising sign on the Vedic side is Sagittarius, and the rising sign is Capricorn. I'm going to focus a little bit more on where the moon is. So the moon and the Vedic, on the Vedic side, is in Aries, and the moon on the tropical side is actually in Taurus. So this is what we commonly say is the big sign difference, because there's a 23-degree difference in where we believe, or they believe, the zodiac starts. But that's why there is almost one sign here. And if you notice here, the moon's with Rahu as well on the tropical. And quite frankly, you can read this from both schools and they do make sense. It's just how you're reading it. So if we continue with this, you can see here, the moon is in Aries, and what rules Aries? Mars. And so Mars is called the Lord of the moon. And the moon in Aries, ruled by Mars. Mars is in the 12th house. So interestingly enough, that makes sense because he lost his mother, and the ruler of the moon is in the 12th house. Now, if we go to the tropical sign, the moon is with Rahu. That itself just will let us know the mother had, a lot of obsessions, a lot of addictions, and she did. I think it's, no secret about what his mother and her problems were on a global level. So that actually makes a lot of sense. And if we look here, the ruler of this is Taurus, and that's Venus, which goes to the 10th house. So, there's multiple ways this can be interpreted. Venus is the wife in a man's chart for Vedic astrology, And the fact that it goes to the 10th house can say a lot. It can say it's in Libra, so it's in its own sign. So his wife is very well spoken on a global platform, which again, we can all see that. What else can I say here? So the 4th house in Vedic astrology is in Pisces, and it's ruled by Jupiter. So there is a very tight connection between himself and the 4th house. Ruled by Jupiter, it also means that just from a very material level in terms of, you know, his assets, he tends to have larger than life, or does, you know, very well with his home and his personal assets. Here it's in Aries, the 4th house, and you can see it's ruled by Mars, which goes to the 12th. And again, this actually makes a lot of sense. He's lost his mother. So the ruler of the 4th and the 12th usually signifies some sort of loss by the mother. The nakshatra. So these are the constellations of Vedic astrology. And again, unfortunately, I don't have time for the mythology in this class, but, you know, maybe another time. But his nakshatra is in what's called Kritika. Kritika is a constellation. It's ruled by the sun. The symbol is the knife or the razor, and its deity rules fire. So if we put this together, this is somebody who's a warrior that's very protective. Lots of up and downs in life. He tends to look out for the family, and in essence, just is very protective. As we think of somebody who holds a blade or a knife, they tend to be protective of whatever they're doing, whether it's a surgeon, a chef. You know, we're not saying this person holds a blade or knife, but just deals with protection and nurturing. Also, somebody who has the moon in Kritika tends to be accused of wrongdoings, and I think we've seen that as well. So that's one thing. And interestingly enough, his moon remains in Kritika in the tropical as well. The lord of this nakshatra Kritika is the sun, and the sun goes to his 9th house. Interestingly enough, his sun is at 29 degrees here. And there's always been rumors about who his father really is. And the fact that it is at what we call Sandhi, or the very last degree, you know, kind of tells a little bit more about that story and adds color. Here, the moon, the sun also goes to the 9th house and is with Mercury. So we've got some similar, you know, things here that are adding up. The aspects to the moon here in Vedic astrology are directly aspected by Saturn, as you can see, a 7th house aspect. It's also aspected by the south node, the 4th house is aspected by the south node. So there is just indications that there's going to be hardships with the mother here. If we look at it from the tropical perspective, you can see here that Saturn and K2 are aspecting it as well. Mars is also aspecting the third house here. So there's, you know, some similarities here, some differences, but all in all can just tell you that his moon is very impactful, very impacted. It's not necessarily, you know, the strongest moon in the sense that he's got a lot of harsh aspects that he's had to overcome in his life and probably will continue to overcome. So, you know, Jim, I think I'm probably there for time. So I would love to say some stories, but definitely want to respect your agenda, and I'll stop sharing and give it back to you. So, you know, thank you everybody for listening. Once again, it's just been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you,
Oh,
Tia.
somebody said Prince William doesn't.
Yeah.
Really quick, somebody said, okay, my words are breaking up, sorry. Prince William doesn't have that, but still lost his mother. Yeah, Prince William actually, I think, may have the moon in the 8th house. I'll have to check on that. But I think there's just other aspects of looking at how you lose your mom. It's not necessarily just, like I said, black and white or just one aspect. But you know, I can actually look that up real quick. So I'm going to stop sharing, and thank you, everyone.
Okay. Oh, here we go. Oh, it's back. Thank you. I took a quick look at Prince William's chart, and he has moon in Cancer. He was born right after a solar eclipse. It shows in Western, it shows, well, yeah, it shows him as Sun, Moon, North Node, Rahu in Cancer, which would be Gemini, I guess, in the Vedic perspective, but it puts it in the seventh house, and the moon is contained between the sun and the North Node. So that, I don't know, that might have an effect on it. But okay, so thank you. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to switch back to, whoops. And before I do that, I need to, yeah,
Can
there
I
we
ask
go.
a really quick question about Vedic astrology?
Yes.
Does Vedic astrology consider any importance to the progressed moon? That's all.
I don't really call it, or I'm not familiar with what a progressed moon is. So there may be another name in Vedic astrology for a progressed moon, but we don't usually use the terms like progressions. So that could just be a good take home for me, because there's a lot of Western terminology I'm not like 100% familiar with, but that's good for me to know, because I think there is something, but we don't call it a progressed moon. It's called something else.
I know it changes about every 2.5 years, I think. Something like that, the progressed moon in Western astrology. That's all. And it aspects. Okay. So anyway, that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to try to bring in more Vedic astrology in our meetings as we go through them and show some of the differences. I think some of you may have noticed that when she was talking about the houses, how there are some variations in the houses. And at some point, we'll probably have a session on the houses, and we'll just focus on the 12 houses, and we'll look at some of the differences between Western and Vedic. Now, let me get back to, hang on, what's going on here? Did you make me the host?
Really quick, somebody had asked about Prince William. So yeah. Just 30 seconds. The ruler of his fourth house, which is his mother, goes to the 11th house. The 11th house is 8 from the 4th. So that's how you can see that there was going to have something, happen, or there was going to be some type of loss with his mother. That's called Bhavam, which is house derivatives, which is a little bit more of an advanced Vedic astrology, but sometimes it's hard to see a loss. But when you do things like that, the 11th house is 8 from the 4th. And since the 8th signifies death, loss, change, or transformation, it's another way to look at the loss of the mother. So I just wanted to throw that in really quick.
Okay. Tia, can you make me the host, please?
Sure. How? I didn't realize I hadn't made you the host. I can do that. Where do I do that here?
Okay, so you bring up the participant list and you find me, and then under more.
Oh, sure. Yep, got it.
There we go.
All right. All done.
Whee! Okay, I'm hosting again. All right, so now I'm going to share this, go back, and we'll get back to our slideshow. And Spencer, you're on. Spencer. Unmute, Spencer.
Yeah, I have had, if the phone rings, it's Mother's Day and people are calling my mom and my wife, and that's why I had it muted. Now I've had everyone told to be quiet. And the situation here is that I'm going to talk about the moon, and I think I'm going to deviate a little bit from all this because I feel, and is there any way that I can see the group, Jim, without I'd like to do kind of a survey here and kind of so we can show.
Okay, hang on. Yeah, let me get, oops, hang back. Here we go. Stop the sharing. There you go.
Okay, can we see everybody? We have 27 people here.
That's, yeah, I think it seems to max out at 25, so.
No, you can do it. All right. All right. I know that we have some master astrologers in this group, and I like Cornelia teaches at Kepler, and I've heard a couple of people who come from Oregon and other places. So can I just have a hand from people who already give readings so I can kind of take a look on this? If you give readings, let me know, because what I'd like to do, yeah, lots of waivers here. So what I think I'm going to try and do, yeah, I see you, Katrina, yeah. And what I want to do then is do this kind of in a different way. You can take me back now, Jim, to the formatting here, because what I'm saying here is when we look at what I've got prepared, it's kind of really based towards beginners and people who are kind of new, and we have such a group of people who are already interested in knowing astrology and already have done a lot of astrology, that I have a way I'm going to deviate from the normal, which will then lead into what we're going to do when we talk about Jobs and Bill Gates, and how they both have Aries moons and what an interesting thing that is. So let's talk about, first of all, I want to talk about, this is from Jeff Mayo, this part of the talk. And Jeff Mayo is, to me, is one of my favorite astrologers. He has a book, which is one of the ones I refer to quite a bit. It's called The Planets and Human Behavior. It's been reprinted several times. It's available in paperback. And so he has a thing like, first of all, we're going to talk about the feminine principle. Like the moon is a feminine principle. And so this means we're going to look at certain things that are part of the whole concept of the feminine icon or need or symbol. And this is the need to nurture and protect others, receptiveness, impressionability, and powerful emotional content, sensitivity, moodiness, and rhythmic ebb and flow of energy and actualization. Now, to me, these really, in one way or another, and you can expand on these, like the need to nurture is obviously something, the need to protect others. What a way to say maternal instincts. I mean, some of us get maternal about people that aren't even a kid, and we start having our best friends, we're maternal towards them. So there's a lot of different ways that when we say to nurture and protect others, that it can be, seen as something you can take it from a generalization and put it into a specific, so we don't have to go around the zodiac here. Impressionability. Now that's another aspect of the moon that if you know people have like Pisces moon and other kinds of moons that are, there are certain aspects of the moon, they can be very impressionable. And one of the funny things about this is that the sense of nervousness comes from the moon when it's poorly aspected, I think, is that they're too impressionable. So you have to kind of take this, and we're going to look at different keywords in a minute. Powerful emotional content, I think, is a wonderful overall statement of the moon right there. If you look at it, I think you can say that basically about a lot of signs, but I think the emotional content of the water signs is very good. Sensitivity, moviness, rhythmic ebb and flow. I think the rhythmic ebb and flow is something that's really very interesting, and it has a certain way to show that how we have tides. And I think we also are very responsive as ourselves to the moon, because if we're 90-some% water, the moon then is like very ruler of the tides. We all have a sensitivity. I don't know how many people went through the moon in the full moon in Zodiac, in Scorpio, excuse me. That full moon in Scorpio was an absolute bombshell with me and my friends. We all went, my God, what is happening to us? We all went out and did rituals, and I don't usually do rituals. I usually just sit around and look at it and say, what a nice moon. But this thing was so powerful to me that I wish I could see you, because I'd like to know how many other people had a strong Scorpio moon. But that was really one that I thought was strong. So that's another rhythmic ebb and flow of the energy. So also actualization. Well, this whole concept of actualization, I think, is part of the aspect that we're growing up. We've got to find our emotional content has to be something that's is now folded into a personality, so that it works with the whole rest of the personality, and certainly having the moods and the rhythms and all of these things attuned, like Jung said, all of this actualization stuff has to be really worked on, how you are able to use, so I would say, the whole chart in terms of dealing with all these different things. And it also improves that you have to have your moon in some way under control. Now let's go to the keywords I've got, Jim. All right, now here, these words are basically Mayo's, because I like them. They're so strongly said, and they have such wide meaning. They're generalizations that you can carry in a lot of different ways, and like adaptability, assimilation, domestication, impressionableness, magnetism. Now, this magnetism is something that we sometimes say, now those Scorpios, they're a little magnetic group, all right? And so that's interesting, yeah, but the moon can also be very magnetic. The moon in certain situations can have a charisma of its own, a power of its own that is, and it's not just in Leo either. It can be in a lot of different aspects on how it works within a sign. So it can be people who have a lot of magnetism can sometimes have a very, very dominant moon configuration. And productiveness, part of the aspect of the moon and being involved with the reproductive process, and the fact that we get the whole civilization comes through the womb of the moon, that this whole concept of production of sense goes over to our crops, it goes over to our education system, all these things which can have emotional content. Now, emotional content, one of these is that people are so weirded out over this whole cancel thing. And that thing is growing and becoming very, very counterproductive, I think. Receptiveness, a good moon will really listen to you, will develop a way of responding to things. Now, the other aspect here is the concept of sentimentality. Sentimentality is a way that we talk about sentiment. Sentiment is kind of like another aspect of a moon. And then we come to affection. And affection is something that's not just Venus, and it's not just the concept of this love, but it's affectionate is part of the maternal instinct, the affection to make people grow, the wanting other people to grow, to stand by your friend that you really love and care about and do things with them. This is part of the affection aspect of it. The conscientiousness. Now, a good moon is going to have a very strong sense of its own awareness, and also a sense of let's say, consciousness, but also, let's say, they have an ability to also worry about the meaning of things, and if we have a conscience, how that works in with the whole concept of being maternal and having a right and a wrong. A good memory. Now, this is something that is something that people say, those Scorpios, they have a memory forever because they want to really get together on their revenge plot. This memory for Scorpios is just supposed to be so great. But I tell you that the moon itself has an excellent memory. It has an excellent memory for emotions. It has a good memory for how we were raised, the kind of maternal instincts that were showered down on us. And we remember these things. These are locked in. If you want to know whether things are really locked into some person's sensitivity or awareness of how things have gone on, they remember things and are going to remember things that people said to them that hurt their feelings. And so there's this whole idea of sentimentality and being very sensitive is also a fact, I think, of conscientiousness, and that we have a good memory from that. Introspection. This is something that I think that also comes from an ability to want to get involved with this and deal with thinking within yourself. And a good moon will also look over its there's a whole panoply of feelings going on in us every day. Because as we're walking down the street, we might suddenly not even think about it, but suddenly we flash back to some memory and have or go into introspection over something that you really just pops up. Now, the maternal instinct, we all talk about maternal instinct, and there's no doubt that the moon is the mother, and there's no doubt that the moon has instincts towards caring, towards reproduction. Prudence, now this is, now remember, this is Mayo's group. Now, I don't know if the moon is prudent all the time, but I do know that it has a sense of its own kind of morality and a sense of its own of what is the right thing to do. Prudence is like persevering or something like that. Now, romanticizing is another aspect that Mayo gives to this. And I think that there is an aspect of when you get emotionally involved with someone that is not just Venus, that your whole personality gets involved with kind of looking at a larger romantic concept. Now, there's romance that is kind of, yes, this is a good romance, but when we get to the negatives, we'll look at another aspect. That we have sympathy, very, or empathetic, I would also add. And so we have very good sympathy about this. Animation, making things happen and making things move. Remember, it's a capital, it's a cardinal, the Cancer is a cardinal sign. And I always say that, you know, don't underestimate that moon, because that's a cardinal sign. It's a cardinal sign in water. And so there's a whole strong thing, the moon behind making things happen. There's creativeness here. A good moon will have a great creative aspect to it. Let's look at imagination. I'm going to kind of go through these quickly because I have a game I want to play when we get to the end of this. Kindness, modesty, protectiveness, sensitivity, we went over that, and tenacity, which is another aspect of prudence, I think. So these are the positive things according to Mayo. Can we go to the next thing? Now, these are the negative key words by Mayo. And what I like these are that he has words which are generalization that can be brought to focus on many different things, like apathetic. One of the bad things is that they don't, a moon will abandon its maternal or its sensitive aspects and become apathetic. We have emotional outbursts. Now, the moon is known to have a temper. I mean, you don't want to make a Cancer moon upset, because there's all this maternal mother bear instinct that can come out. But also that mother bear can also not be a mother bear, but just generally being a very moody person who can have outbursts. And this is something that Cancers are known to sometimes have a very strong anger switch. Indecisiveness, they're emotionally needing to feel things out in this way or that. Morbid sensitivity is something that I've run into with people who have moons in a difficult situation. And there is a way to feel happy with your sensitivity. There's a way to seek out the underbelly of how things work. And on one hand, this is very productive if you like horror movies, but I don't like a friend who's always a horror movie, if you get that point. Prone to fantasies. If you're upset with yourself and you've had emotional outbursts and you're indecisive, you might have a fantasy or two. Now, the fantasies work that it is always in some way a fantasy that is trying to work off some kind of wound, I think. Timidness, this is the opposite of the maternal instinct. This is someone that is very shy. Unreliable, that's very true. But I want to get to clannishness. Now, I think that certain moons, I don't know if this is various ways, is that this third house thing or a ninth house thing. Clannishness to me is, you meet some people that, you know, if you're with them, you join a group that's an entourage. You know, they have to have this family they've made with them. Or you get to some people, they come from a family, you can't believe it. This is a tribe. You take someone out from that group and everyone has to inspect you. Or God forbid you do something to make them all mad. Now, there are frivolousness to you. And I think that comes from the sensitivity that's turned into kind of a Susie, and just wants to have an attention to little teeny details. So there's a little Virgo aspect to this moon that'll look, because of its sensitivity, it'll have instability is another thing that the moon can really have. Prejudice is another aspect. And this is also something that can happen from the maternal. I know a lot of people, and I hate to say it, but a lot of people got their racial prejudice problems through the mother. It's something that there's nothing like a mother that is very down on things. There's also the fight in the divorce where the mother tries to make the kids prejudice against their father because he's such a nutcase and hasn't been doing things. So there's an aspect to it. Restlessness, they can be very nervous and too changeable. This is a borderline personality mood. You never really know who they're going to be the next time you see them. The weak-willed moon is an aspect where the emotionalities people are kind of I wouldn't say a doormat, but I would say that they don't have a lot to do it. Now, easily fluenced, that's another aspect of the moon. Fussiness, moodiness, procrastination, superstition. These all are defining aspects. And I've done enough of this so you can see my key in this point, because we have so many people in this audience who are already giving readings and already have a very strong aspect of what they think is their working concept of the moon. And I'm not really teaching them anything by doing this. Now, could we go to the next slide for a minute? There we go. Now, we're going to talk about this, and this is where I want to play a game, because I was going to say, we had a bunch of beginners. I'd say, okay, what do you do with your moon? First of all, where the hell is the moon? It's in your 7th house. It's in the state's house. So you know, and then what is the sign of that moon in that house? So then you go through the ruler of the sign and the house and the cusp, and you consider the sign of the moon is in and its ruler. But I want to kind of step away from this. I'd like, Jim, can I have everyone being shown here for a minute now? I want to get off of this platform and into one where I can see people. All right. Now, this is the game. You don't know what a moon is till you have had my moon, okay? This is an idea. So look, I'll start it off, and here's the idea. If you have a really weird moon, or you have a moon you want to warn people about, wave your hand a lot, and I'm going to call on you. Now, here's how it's going to go. I have the worst moon in the world. I'm going to tell you why. First of all, it's in Aquarius. Now, Aquarius are not huggy people. By definition, they're an air sign. It's fixed. So you're a moody person. It's also can be distant. You also, are very much an independent person. But my moon is also opposed by Pluto. So my God, that means I've had all of this dark energy come to me through the moon, and it makes me really kind of always look at where the real anger and just is in myself, and it comes out. So it's a point that I wanted to make. One other thing I think it's wrong with my moon, and you may not agree with me, my moon is my tightest aspect to my Neptune, and it's the tightest aspect in my chart. Now, what does that do to my nice little sensitive Aquarius moon? It makes me really get too involved with everything. I can't, I'm one step away from being crazy half the time because of this. Now, the name of the game is, and I'm in Toastmasters, and we do things by a rule. Now, I'm going to give you 3 minutes if you wave your hand enough, and those who get chosen and you want to talk about your moon, wave your hand, and I'll say, because I can see your names. So everyone's free to unmute yourself, and so that you can hear, we know you're going to talk, and you can hear me. So, all right, who wants to go off with our game of the Have a Moon? All right, Cornelia. Okay, here's Cornelia with her moon crisis.
I think I mentioned one time in our meeting that I have a mutual reception between my Leo moon and my Cancer sun. And they're kind of, most of my life, they've been battling each other. Do I want attention? Then on the other hand, no, I'm afraid when I get it. So it's been a battle, but I do want to add one word to your list of words, which I think is important, and that's security. Because our first relationship with our mother is a key one, or whoever has us, even if, because you can see in a case where, for instance, my son has raised his son by himself. His mother was always working and Alan stayed home and took care of him. So the bonding there is with the father. But that first bond that we make with the important figure is what gives us a sense of security and trust in the environment. If there's a disruption in that bond, it has a lot of negative consequences. If the child doesn't develop a trust of the environment, they're going to have a lot of different relationships because they can't trust an emotional relationship. So it has a lot of effect on, because it's so unconscious. That first 18 months, our relationship with our mother is so unconscious, and we get into a close emotional bond. It brings up all of those needs that we didn't get satisfied as children and that we look for in a partner. So
Okay.
that's all I have to say.
All right, that's good. I agree. Security is a big issue. I think that the way the moon works, our security is based upon our impressionability. I agree with you totally. They have a picture on TV and an ad where they show that baby right on his mother, and you can see this baby. I don't know if you've all seen this ad, but it's right looking there, and you can see the tension and the willing of the bond that you're bringing. All right, who else wants to talk about the moon? Wave your hand. Okay, we have Ewig. Go. Unmute yourself.
I'm sorry, it's Lynn Ewing, but that's okay. I have a Virgo moon. It's conjunct Venus. It's in the third, and I'm a Cancer rising, so that kind of works into that as well. And my moon is part of a grand square. So although I don't really always think of it as difficult, I do when I have my immediate response to things is emotional, but I have to take some time to analyze what emotion am I actually feeling. And that's where the Virgo part comes in. And then with it being conjunct Venus in Virgo, which is all about the details and such, I actually have emotional responses to the beauty of things or the lack thereof. So if I'm in a room that is not decorated well, or things are not in balance, I'm emotionally disturbed by that. I know it sounds crazy, but that really is true. I'll just give you an idea. I was a pattern maker, professional pattern maker and seamstress, and I went to a concert one night. And I was right at the stage, and the band was really, really good. But two guys in the band had really bad hems on their pants. And it just ruined the whole thing for me, because all I could see was, how could they possibly get on stage with bad hems? So there's always these little details that are important and off-putting at the same time. So when the details are really good, it's almost an ethereal experience. So that's how I experience.
I know exactly. I have some Virgo. It's not the moon, but I have Virgo enough that I can, and I have, anyway, I agree with you totally about when you walk into a room, and even if the picture is just a little
exactly. It's like I can see like a 16th of an inch off in a mat that's on a print, and that's all I can see after that. It's not that I want to be that specific. I just kind of can't help it.
Okay, very good. All right, we got time for a couple more people because we got a little behind here, and we want to talk about stuff, and Jim's going to talk about paradigms of the different cycles of the moon. So someone else want to do this? Anyone want to wave?
Caroline.
Oh, who? Heartfelt astrology. What is that? You're muted.
Unmute. Caroline, unmute yourself.
I tried to put my name on there, but I couldn't figure out how to rename myself. That's my email on there. So I'm not quite sure how to interpret all of this, but I have a moon in Libra in the 7th, and it's totally married to Neptune and Chiron, and couple degrees away from Jupiter, and it squares my nodes. And thank heavens my progressed sun has moved into Sagittarius just now. I don't even notice the difference. But I would say I've kind of learned to use the different parts of my chart, make the best of them. But I've tended to, with the Chiron there, the moon conjunct Chiron, I've definitely drawn, I'm good talking to people, you know, I can do that really well, all kinds of
Okay,
people.
okay.
But I would say connected to Chiron, I've drawn wounded, very wounded.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much. I saw that Zan, you were waving your hands, I think, weren't you? Did I see you waving your arms?
Yes.
You're
Unmute.
muted. You're muted.
Unmute, Zan.
Hi, thanks. Just a quick question. I graduated from a 2-year course in Scottsdale from the Astrological Institute, just as my first grandchild was being born. And so I was just, everything was popping in my mind. I was fresh with all this information, and I'm sitting outside the delivery room and I'm ticking off, you know, oh my God, this baby's going to have a 0-degree Aries moon. Oh my God, you know, hilarious. Because how in the world, that's going to be a really tough thing. What's interesting now is that he's almost 19 and he has the personality. He is a tremendous athlete, but he has the personality that my son, who is Scorpio, just like me, would describe as nonplussed. He literally is so even keel that it just fascinates me. How can you have a 0-degree Aries moon in this? I don't know. And it's unaspected.
What house is it in?
6th house.
Ah, 6th house. Okay. Well, thank you for that. We got time for one more crazy moon. Anyone who really want to raise their hand and talk about their moon for us and see where it was going? Let me just take a look. Katrina, did you wave? Okay, I guess not. All right. Anyone else? No one else. Oh, hold on. Okay.
Beryl.
Beryl. Okay, you're the last one, so make it good. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, no, it's not that good. It's just that nobody seems to have mentioned the mother. And I have Moon conjunct Venus in the 3rd, exactly opposite Pluto and trine Uranus. And I had a really love-hate relationship with my mother. I was terrified of her as a child. Don't know, but
Was there a betrayal?
Pardon?
Did you feel betrayed by your mother?
No, actually, when we got older, I had a good relationship, but as a child, I was absolutely terrified of her. But I've got no fire in my chart and no earth. So I'm all water and air. And what they used to say about me was they had never known such a watery headed child.
You have no water and air?
I'm all water and air.
You're all water and air.
Yeah, no earth, no fire. Well, Pluto's in fire.
Well, that's very interesting because I know when we get on to Bill Gates, he has no earth. So let's hang it up there. I really want to thank you guys for participating. I think this was a lot more fun than having me talk about where your moon is and where all of this stuff is, and then teach you how to find it and work with it, and then come up with some kind of cookie cutter idea. This is great. See, everyone is, so thank you very much. And I'm now going to return control of this meeting back to Jim, who's got the next phase of our presentation.
All righty. So, well, yeah, so we thought we might look at a couple of charts, and we started with just Bill Gates because Bill and Melinda have been in the news lately. I am unmuted, aren't I? And you can see Bill's chart. He has no planets retrograde. Basically, everything is in the northern hemisphere, except for the moon. He was born shortly after. Let's see, he was born in about probably 3 days after a full moon. No, other way around. Let's see, 7, 14, 21. He was born a couple of days before the full moon. But here's his chart. So the delineation process would be one of saying, well, moon in the 10th house in Aries, you have Pisces on the cusp. So there you have Neptune involved. In Aries, you have Mars involved. And you kind of go from there. You build it all up together. It's you see it opposing Mars and Mercury in Libra, and it's trining Uranus. So Uranus can add that creativity, inspirational aspect. And when you think of Bill Gates, he basically was the driving force behind the creation of Microsoft. Started by writing the Microsoft Basic language, which was one of the first languages used with personal computers. Went on to become the richest man in the world for several years. Now I think they're he's third or fourth now, I guess. So he's still worth a lot of money. He and his wife run the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He's really big, once he got out of micro, even before he got out, but he's really big on the philanthropy aspect. He's put up like $1 billion to help develop the COVID vaccine. So that's where we were at. We were looking at his chart. You want to add anything, Spencer? We got
yeah. I want to talk about a couple of things right here that I think point to his one of the basic aspects of his creativity or his ability to come up with inventiveness. And did everyone read the pop-up that came in from Al about evidently he stole some aspect when he started? He conned another guy out of his system and claimed it was his own. But what I want to talk about here is the opposition of the moon in Aries and the Mars in Libra within orb to Mercury, actually, that then we see this very strong trine to Uranus in Leo. Now you have all that energy coming. It's that between the moon and Mars, and that's not just happy energy. There was a lot of energy in there that it shows a lot of competitiveness, a strong feeling of needing to make things happen. With the Mars isn't happy in Libra. It hates Libra, for God's sake. You got to be fair. And so this is a problem. But what I want to point out is what I think releases this energy is that the Uranus energy in Leo is what he releases when he gets so angry. He becomes even creative. He takes his whole feelings and getting involved is how to do things differently. How can I invent? How can I do? And his own strong individualism and his own. Now, when we talk about the fact the guy is aggressive, remember he had a complete monopoly on all of these things and he had to be taken to court to break up his monopoly. And he had, this is a little crude, but he used to say to people before he annexed them, he'd take over a company because they would compete with him. And this came out, if you ever watched part of the trial, which I don't think anyone did, but anyway, they would say, we're going to piss on this company. That was the way they said they were going to buy it. So you can understand that the aggressiveness of this guy is really gung-ho. And the other thing I would like to say is that the energy driven by this guy at another level, we should talk about his moon, is I give the square between Saturn, Venus, and then with Jupiter and Pluto. One other thing I would like to say is I think that anytime you see a Venus that close to the father, that his basic concept of how to get things done was he had to satisfy an authority figure in his house. He had to prove himself in some ways. But that's my talk about it. I got a little off of the moon, but that's my feeling about the moon in Aries trining Uranus in Leo. And I also would give him that, Leo would give him that ability to be the guy in the room that gets attention.
Yeah, Al mentioned that apparently Bill Gates' father was a eugenicist. So, yeah. Okay, so then we decided, well, let's take a look at Steve Jobs. Where Bill has no planets in Earth signs, and he has no planets in mutable signs. So it's unusual to not have to be missing a mode of operation. So Gates is entirely cardinal or fixed. He's all fire, air, and water. Steve Jobs is all, primarily cardinal. Only one mutable, and that one is Sun in Pisces. But you can see now Steve Jobs has got 5 retrograde planets. He's got a very different dynamic type of personality between Steve with 5 retrograde planets, and Bill Gates with none. So Steve is going to tend to internalize more, take things more personally. But also, if you notice also down here, and you'll see that his moon, his sun, and his Mercury are unaspected. When you look on the chart, there's the moon. Whoops. Come back here. Oops. So here you see the moon in the 7th house.
And
My
it's
mouse is
conjunct,
having.
isn't it conjunct Bill Gates' moon?
It is. There's a 3-minute orb between their moons.
Mm-hmm.
He has Mercury stationing, retrograde, but getting ready to go direct. So what we did then, just to keep things flowing, is we took a look. We added in some other stuff. We added in the nodes and the ascendant and the midheaven. There's Bill, there's Steve. But here's the wheel for the 2 guys. And now you can really see it. They are Bill's on the inside, Steve's on the outside.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And both of them were born with fast moons, the moon moving quickly. It's traveling at over 14 degrees a day. And keep it, one of the things about the moon, you want to get a sense of how fast the moon was moving when, if you can, when you were born. Was it slow, like 12 degrees or less? Okay? Or was it fast, like 14 or 15 degrees per day? Because the moon can go, maxes out at just over 15 degrees a day, which means it can zip through a sign in a couple of days. Or it can be as slow as less than 12, which means more than 2.5, pushing 3 days to get through a sign. And
Can I ask you a question, Jim?
Sure.
Have you
Yeah.
ever looked at McCransky's threshold of response, mental chemistry, where he talks about whether your moon is fast and Mercury goes behind the sun or vice versa? There's 4 different types of thinking.
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
McCransky? What's the name?
He had an article. He had an article a long time ago, and Bob McCransky had an article
Bob.
in.
Okay, yes, Bob. Okay,
Yeah,
Bob McCransky. I'll see if I can find it. I know that there's.
he had an article on it in the Mountain
Mountain
the
Astrologer.
magazine. Yes, yes.
Okay, I'll definitely look for
Called
that.
Mental Chemistry. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I know I've kind of looked at the Mercury and the Venus things, because there's like 4 different types of them in terms of, are they direct, are they before the sun or after the sun? So there's a lot of variations, subtle variations there that we seldom talk about. Okay, so we're pushing our time limit. Any other, but if you'll notice over here under you see the synastry box over here, notice all the close aspects between their charts. Now they're born, birthwise, they're born the same year. They're like 8 months apart. Steve was a little, 8 months older, born early, he's an early Pisces, 5 Pisces. Gates is an early Scorpio, born late October. Suns are basically trining each other, 5 Scorpio to 5 Pisces. Saturns are conjunct because of that age difference. So but you notice that even though they're only 8 months apart, notice how much, for example, that Uranus has moved. It moved 8 degrees between when Steve was born at 24, when it was at 24 Cancer, and when Bill was born at 2 Leo. Their Neptunes are conjunct because it hadn't moved. It probably had a retrograde in between. Pluto's moved quite a bit, from 25 to 28. All right, where are we at here? Okay, I wanted to quickly mention lunar phases and lunar cycles. Okay, they're not the same thing. Okay. The lunar phases are basically what we see or don't see in terms of the moon. Now, there's 5 major Ptolemaic aspects, but also 9 lunar phases. Most people may talk of 4, some will talk of 8, but the reality is there's 9. But you have to really get involved primarily in goddess work in order to find that. So we have the conjunction at 0 degrees, which is, the asterisk indicates the major Ptolemaic aspects. That's the new moon. At 45 degrees, we hit the semi-square or the octile, which is a minor aspect. This is the crescent moon. These are the waxing phases where the moon grows and gets bigger and bigger, and we see basically more and more of the moon. Was it Shakespeare said, "Oh, inconstant moon"? It's because it's constantly changing from one night to the next. You see more of it or you see less of it. The 60 degrees, which is the sextile, that doesn't correspond really with any phase. There's the 90 degree square, which is the first quarter or crisis of action square. There's the 120 degree trine. There's the 135 degrees, which is the sesquiquadrate or trioctile. It's the gibbous phase. And then you have the 180 degrees, the opposition, the full moon. Things that can be significant that you want to consider when you're looking at your chart is try to figure out what was the moon when you were born? Were you born with a full moon, a new moon type, first quarter square, third quarter square? Okay. So then we look at the waning phase, which is that time when it goes from full back to new again. And here first thing that comes up, we have the 225 degrees or 135 degrees, however you want to look at it. It's 225 degrees from new, from the previous new moon. It's the waning gibbous phase. And you have at the 240 or 120, you have the waning trine. And then you get to the waning square, which is 90 degrees from the sun or 270 degrees since the new moon, which is the crisis of consciousness. And here's where it can get a little tricky when you try to figure out, well, am I a first quarter or a third quarter moon? Well, you look at where is the moon relative to the sun? And if you start with the sun and you move through the zodiac in the order of the zodiac, which is counterclockwise, if you come to the moon, if the moon is basically 3 signs, then you're dealing with the first quarter. If on the other hand, the moon is 3 signs behind the sun, then you're dealing with the third quarter moon. At 300 degrees or 60 degrees, you've got the waning sextile. At 315 or 45 degrees, you have the semi-square or octile, the balsamic moon. This is that closing phase where the moon is beginning to disappear and get ready for the next new moon. But then before the new moon, probably 2 to 4 hours before that new moon, when the moon is maybe 357, 58, 59 degrees behind the sun. So it's close, but not quite there yet. You're into what is the no moon phase. You can't see it because, it's going to rise literally right before the sun. And this time is well suited for doing moon rituals, particularly banishment rituals. Those of you who do rituals. So there's more than just a new moon ritual and a full moon ritual. And you want to pay attention to whether you're doing the ritual at the time of the new moon or the full moon, or if you're going to do it slightly, shortly before or shortly after. The cycles, though, are something else. The cycles, the monthly cycle, this is how long it takes the moon to orbit the Earth, is 27, basically 27 and a third days. And so the Vedic concept of nakshatras is based on this 27-day cycle. But the lunar phase return, which would be new moon to new moon, is about 29 and a half days. So that difference is because the Earth and the moon, the Earth is moving at the same time that the moon is orbiting the Earth. And so this causes that shift so that the phase return takes longer than the actual lunar return. Now, there's also an interesting phenomenon that I learned about a few years ago. If you start with any new moon, approximately 9 months later, you will get a first quarter moon at or near that same degree. And then 9 months after that, you're going to get a full moon at or near that same degree. And then 9 months later, approximately, you'll get a third quarter moon at or near that same degree. So the moon, which has this, we think of in terms of the monthly cycle, also has this longer cycle that literally runs about 3 years from as you go through this process. And the moon also has this out of bounds cycle, where over a period of 18 years, it'll spend approximately 9 years, the moon doesn't go out of bounds at all. And then for about 9 years, she goes out of bounds again. We entered this cycle last year where it's going out of bounds. And the first time it goes out, it just goes out a little bit for a little while. But each month after that, it goes a little bit further and lasts a little bit longer. And so it'll go out of bounds twice each month or each cycle, which is once it'll be north out of bounds, and then the other time it'll be south out of bounds. And the way you can tell is by simply watching the moon finding the moon at night. Where is it in the sky? Is it high in the sky or is it low in the sky? And as you start to watch that, you can see where sometimes it's very high and sometimes it's relatively very low. And then when it culminates, when it reaches its maximum degree out of bounds, which is going to be 28, typically 28 plus degrees, called the lunar standstill. The moon doesn't actually stop and stand still, but basically it's at that maximum point out of bounds. And when planets go out of bounds, they can behave in some unorthodox, uncharacteristic ways. Not necessarily bad or good, it's just that they may behave differently or more extreme. So those are things to keep in mind. And I think one of the things I might have forgotten to mention. Yes, I did. I missed in the calendar. We've got a date coming up this month, and I think it's around the 24th, when Mercury, Venus, and Mars will all be out of bounds north. So it's unusual to have a planet out of bounds. It's even more unusual when you have two, and it's very unusual to have three all out of bounds north. And now we're talking about the three personal planets. So I will send something out about that. It only lasts for about a day, but it could prove to be very interesting.
When did you say that was, Jim?
I think it's around May 24th.
Oh, okay.
Let me see. Moon Earth Sun relationships. Are we doing what am I time? I don't know what time it is. Oh, perfect. We're doing good. Okay, so the daily thing, we have high tides and low tides on a daily basis. Monthly phases, the new moon, the first quarter, full moon, third quarter. Those are the most common ones. Annually, you have eclipses. And these occur at least 4 per year. They occur only when you have a new moon or a full moon, where both of them are near one of the lunar nodes. So if you have a new moon on the north node, where they're close to the north node, then that's classified as a north lunar or north solar eclipse. If it's the south node, then it's the south total eclipse. And Yeah, eclipses are another factor to look at. If you're born on or near an eclipse, that can have a significant effect on, could have a significant effect on you. And just the fact that if you look at the degree of the eclipse prior to your birth, you may find that is a sensitive point. Last thing I think is the last thing I have to mention, and that's your secondary progressed moon. I think Caroline, you had asked about that, or somebody had asked about it. By progression, you'll have a lunar return every 27 and a third years. That's where the moon will return to its natal position. On a phase basis, you get that progressed phase return with a sun every 29 and a half years or so. The significance for progressed moon is when you have a progressed new moon, where the progressed moon is conjunct the progressed sun, which will occur sometime after birth, depending upon where they were relative to when you were born. That marks a new beginning. It's a new cycle, a new 29 and a half year cycle. But the other thing is that if you think in terms of Saturn and the moon, you'll notice that Saturn orbits the sun in just under 29 and a half years, while the moon is orbiting the Earth in just under 29 and a half days, or just over 29 and a half days, or 29 and a half years. And those two time frames are so close that at some point, an aspect will develop between the two, between transiting Saturn and progressed moon. And that aspect can exist for several months, even years, as they move back and forth, as the moon speeds up and slows down, as Saturn speeds up and goes retrograde. By motion, transiting Saturn moves slightly faster than progressed moon. And so there are times when they may get caught in what I call the Saturn moon dance. I call it a dance because they'll go in and out of aspect over a period of months or even years. And sometime in the dim recesses of the past, I did a program on that. So let me talk about that more specifically, because it can be very interesting. And you might be wondering, why is something happening and why does it keep happening? It may be that your secondary progressed moon is locked into a particular angle or aspect with transiting Saturn. Okay. Q&As. I want to get, here's Taya's email, Spencer's email, my email. Coming attractions next month, June 13th, planetary containment. Who's in the middle? You think stellium. Which planet is in the middle? So that's what we're going to be talking about. July, yeah, this is a maybe. We might be talking things like final dispositors, planetary signatures, and some other techniques in evaluating the overall chart. August, I've got a friend of mine who has developed a cloud astrology software. He's been working on it for probably 2 or 3 years. And if things stay on course, I'm going to have him do a presentation on his software, and he'll be offering probably some special incentives. It's similar to astro.com, only not astro.com. But and there's some others out there that offer the same, I think, similar programs where you can, you pay a monthly or annual fee, and you don't have to worry about updates because they happen automatically, and you can store all the charts you want out there, and so on. So that's kind of where we stand right now for the months ahead. Thank you. Look forward to seeing you on June 13th. It's not Father's Day. Again, the email addresses there, we're done. I get rid of this. Get y'all back. Hello, everybody. Thank you again. So yeah, the video recording of this, I will get it processed and posted. And as soon as it is, I will send out a link so you can take a look at it if you want. The slideshows, I will get them processed, and I'll post, I'll upload it to our Facebook page. And then if anybody wants them who doesn't want to go to Facebook, just send me an email and I will send it to you. Okay, so let's see. Let's open it up for general questions, comments, thoughts, whatever. Hello.
Hey,
Unmute.
Jim,
Yes.
I'd like to talk just for a minute because we've been talking about this, about the waning moon.
Yes.
And because the waxing moon seems to me like it's very easy to figure out, because it's growing, its growth, the plant is getting happier. And then at the full moon, we start going into the waning moon. And to me, understanding that waning moon is in two parts. One is when you have the 45-degree from the full moon, and there's a 90. And it seems to me now, I'm going to throw out one idea that the full moon is like when you decide to go on a diet, okay? And then you're really working on that diet, and it's so that there's a disseminating aspect here that you've got this powerful energy. And then when you hit the 45 degrees, isn't that 135 from the
Yes.
so that's when you really start to wiggle on the diet. So that means you come up with a big idea. You're going to do something. Something's going to happen. The full moon has had a real power on you. And then the next step is it goes to the quarter moon, the reverse quarter moon. Could we talk about that? Because he calls that the crisis of consciousness.
Yes.
What does he mean by that, you think?
Okay, so here's the terms crisis of action and crisis of consciousness. We come from Dane Rudhyar. And here's my understanding of it. So at the new moon, it's kind of like you plant the seed, and you nurture it and you hope that it's going to grow out. And when it starts to sprout in the pot, you make sure you're pulling out the weeds and not the seed. By the crescent or the first, the 45-degree, you might see the bud starting to pop through. By that first quarter, you've got to do some action on it. You've got to make sure that you're properly tending the plant. If it's, do you need to repot it, replant it into the garden or whatever? It's kind of like if you think in terms of farmers, and I don't know how much of you know about farming, but I grew up on one. But you go out, you till the soil, you plant the seeds, and then as things start to grow, you have to go out there and tend it. You may have to go out and hoe the field so that get rid of the weeds that are growing up. If you're in a dry zone, you may have to irrigate in order to keep the plants growing. You're seeing real progress. By the time you hit the full moon, you know what you've got. You've got some sort of a viable crop. And there are different phases in time when you might harvest a crop. And so, maybe, the full moon could be the early harvest. Like, the harvest moon is the moon in usually right late September, early October. It's the moon that occurs around the autumn equinox. And it's called the harvest moon because it provided extra daylight lasting long or illumination so farmers could work later in the field. Once you get past that, now it's like, what do you do with this crop now that you've harvested it? Maybe you have to shuck the corn and separate the kernels from the corn. And then what do you do with the kernels? Do you store it for feed for the livestock? Do you sell it? So what happens is that you have an idea at the new moon. By the full moon, it's germinated, it's become something. And maybe you present this idea. Let's say you're writing a novel, as another good example. You start writing at the new moon. By the full moon, you've got it written and you're ready for maybe the editing or submit it to the first, want to submit it for publication. And you get it back and then you have to do the editing. So the third quarter is where you get to this crisis of consciousness and you have to decide, what have I really got here? Is it something that is worthwhile? Is it everything, do I need all of this stuff? Or what can I eliminate from it? What isn't working in my story? What no longer serves the purpose? Does it add value to the product? is another way of looking at it. So whatever you've created by that third quarter, waning quarter moon, you're looking at it and saying, okay, this is what I have. Is everything there? Does it all add value to this product? Because if it doesn't add value, if it somehow detracts from the product, then you should, at that point, you make that conscious decision to eliminate it, to pare it down to whatever, as you get ready for the new moon and the beginning of the next project.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, it does. I think that to continue with the diet metaphor, I think that you run into this resistance, but I think that the quarter moon there means that, like you say with the author, this is a crisis of you really come to some place now where you've lost weight, or you come to this place where I got to do it again, or you have to really evaluate whatever was disseminated from that full moon in terms of, I call it whatever is going on in the full moon. If you do the things of the full moon, I think the crisis of consciousness is, did you succeed? And I think that's,
Yes.
kind of agree on that, I think.
Yeah. Whereas the first quarter, you have to make an action decision. Is this thing that I've started, is it worth is it developing the way I want it to develop, or should I forget about it and start over with something else? Or I invest too much of my time. By the full moon, you've invested so much time now that you really want to see it through. And at that third quarter, it's now, how do I finalize my product? From the automobile manufacturing standpoint, they come up with the idea for a car. The first quarter, they may have a clay mock-up. By the full moon, maybe they've got a prototype. They've got it pretty well fleshed out. But at that third quarter, now it's time to decide whether or not you're really going to go into what's the production model going to look like. Because maybe your prototype, you had thought about some features you'd like to have, but you realize that A, they're too expensive, or B, they don't exist yet. Don't have that capability yet. And so you put out what you got.
Okay.
So there's all that process, the whole process of the creation of something. Any other, what do we got here? Any other comments? Thank you. Okay. If any of you have any, Patrita, did you have a comment or a question? Unmute. You need to unmute. Patrita, you need to unmute. Sorry.
I have a question for Tahia.
Uh-huh.
The presentation, she talked about the moon in the first house, and what would be the relationship of a child with the mother when the moon is in the first house? Is it a good bonding, or is it an influence of the mother over influence of the mother over the child?
Tia, you there? Unmute if you're there. She may have stepped away. I think in part it's going to, even in Vedic astrology, keep in mind that it's going to depend on not just the house it's in, but what sign is it in, and the lord of the sign and the lord of the house, and so on. Vedic is basically a whole sign system. But at the same time, you still need to consider what they call the Lord is the ruler of the sign. I think it's a matter also of not just the position of the. Why am I getting an echo? Interesting. Consideration of both the mother and the child in terms of where are their, where's the child's moon? Where's the mother's moon? All of that also plays into everything.
Jim, could I add to that?
Oh, please do, Cornelia. Yeah.
I have been looking at something that interests me, and that's what planet is in the first house. And I find that quite often, because the first house has to do with your early identity, that the house that planet represents somebody you identify. Like I have Venus in the first house. it rules my aunt, because I didn't have my mother. She was the person I identified with the strongest. My grandson has the son in the first house. He identifies with his father. I have the son in the first house. I've identified with my father because my mother wasn't there. So quite often I find that your early identity is influenced by what particular planet in the house they rule, what relative that is. For instance, a grandparent, a cousin, a sibling, whatever, is going to have part of your identity.
And for somebody who doesn't have a planet in the first house, you look to the ruler of that house?
Yes, I look at the ruler of that house.
Would they tend to have as strong an influence as if the planet were in the first house? Or would
I think the planet in the first house has a lot to do with your early identity, because it's established in the year 2 when you start saying me and mine, and then you finally get to the word I, because you're reflecting on other people for your identity. They're giving you your identity. They're telling you you're smart, or you're stupid, or you're pretty, or you're not, or whatever they're telling you, you're taking in it as a child as the truth.
Yeah.
So whoever that person represents, if they're part of it, even from the 12th house, if you have a conjunction to the ascendant, is going to be part of the early identity.
Well, can I ask something here of Cornelia? Cornelia, if you have no planets in the first house, how often then is the chart ruler, the ruler of the first house, more powerful or less powerful?
I haven't examined that. I haven't examined the difference. I always look at the 7th house too, because this is the person that's reflecting to you. Whoever you're in any kind of relationship you're with is going to affect that early childhood. So like I have Saturn in the 7th house. So my mother died when I was very young. So that feeling of abandonment comes from that Saturn in the 7th house. The fear of abandonment comes because I was so young. And it operates kind of unconsciously, but that became part of my fear of abandonment, became part of my identity as a child.
Well, I have Uranus in the 7th. I guess that explains something.
What does it explain to you?
To me, it explains some of my, I guess, my idiosyncrasies and my behavior patterns, I guess, where I have, like several different personalities depending upon circumstances. I had one personality, very different personality at work, different personality when I'm doing astrology, and a different personality at home, and a different personality when I'm by myself.
Oh, we do that. Everybody does that. You have sub personalities. Yes.
Yeah. The Uranus drives me to be either extremes or the eccentric, or, inspiration and sudden ideas that come to my head. And I look for in the 7th house, of course, I'm looking for the unusual or the different or unorthodox in relationships.
Yes. My daughter has Uranus too. She had a long relationship with one person for 17 years, but they never married, but they were considered married because they had to get a divorce when they split up their stuff. Which I thought was kind of, you have to actually have a divorce paper to settle up what you're going to split with between each other.
Yeah. Do they live in California?
No, they're in Colorado.
Colorado. Okay. I know most states don't have common law marriages anymore, but you have the what do they call it now? Thanks to Lee
Alimony.
Alimony, yes. So they've added that legal wrinkle there. Okay, everybody. Well, thank you all very much. Again, if you have any questions that come to you or remain unanswered, do you have any thoughts, comments? Feel free to email, Spencer or I, or, to you with any lingering questions from the Vedic perspective of things. Next month, we're going to be doing containment. So if you've got a containment in your chart and you're wondering about it, let us know about it. And so we can try to address some of these things because
Do you
when
want
you get to-
charts?
yeah, we'll take charts.
Okay.
Always happy to take charts. As Spencer and I explore and develop the concept of how we're going to look at containment. So everybody, thank you again so much for your participation, your support. And we're always open to ideas for future presentations. So if you've got an idea, something we haven't talked about that you'd like us to talk about, let us know.
You might talk about the 4 types of response level from what I said, McCransky's article.
Yes. Okay. I have to take a time. I'll look that up. Yes. So I've been wanting to take a look at Mercury and Venus particularly because of their differences. I think in terms, when I think Mercury Venus, just think in terms of Mercury Venus conjunction. What are they really? Are they both direct? Are they both retrograde? Which one is one on the far side of the sun and one on the near side of the sun? Because when Mercury or Venus is retrograde, that means it's passing between the Earth and the sun. And when they're direct, they're going around the far side of the sun. So if you have what looks like a Mercury-Venus conjunction, and one of them is retrograde, I think it's more like an opposition than a conjunction, because they're on opposite sides of the sun.
Right.
Cornelia,
Yes.
would you put that name into the chat so I can write it down? Because if it's in the Mountain Astrologer and you're paid
do
up
I have
in your
do I have your email? Because I think I may have his article somewhere because I use it in my class. So I could just download it to you. So what is your email?
It's Grendal, like my last name, then Grendal1@yahoo.com.
Okay. If I find it, I will send it to you. Or at least the edition that it's in.
Someone posted a link to it in the chat.
Hi, Rachel. How are you?
Jim.
Shine did. There's a link. You can just click on it and it pops
there it is.
right
Shine.
up.
Thank you, Shine. Somebody actually, bingo. Mental Chemistry in the Birth Chart by Bob McClansky. Okay. I spelled it wrong.
You look very pretty.
Okay. Yes.
Can I make a quick comment, please?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Shine.
Smells very good.
Who's?
May I make a quick comment, Jim?
Yes,
please?
Audrey.
Okay, so I really look forward to your next presentation of the containment. I think that's that's going to be so helpful because nowadays we have, let's say, a stellium of the Taurus, right? We have Sun, Uranus, Venus, Mercury. I mean, this is going on. At first, Sun was before Uranus, and then now Sun is behind or ahead of Uranus. And so these are really good for people who do horror readings because I do a lot of horror readings. And then so the containment, what's in the middle, and so I think that's fascinating. That's interesting.
Okay, thank you. Anybody got anything else? As usual, we've run over, but that's okay.
Thank you.
Happy Mother's
Day
again.
Happy Mother's Day.
Yes, happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day to everybody.
Yes, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Keep in mind, there are only 2 types of people in the world.
Yep.
There are mothers and there are children of mothers.
Yeah, there you go.
All righty, take care, everybody. See you next month. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Talk to you later, Spence.
Okay, this is a question. I tried to get on that Mountain Astrologer, and I think you have to do that through the website itself. Do you happen
I
just
clicked
to
on the
remember-
link and I got right there. I'll send it to you.
I mean, no, have you tried to use the link? That's what I
I did.
mean.
Yeah, I did. I clicked the link and it took me right there. So I'll send
Okay.
it, but if you have a problem, I'll send you the article.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Bye, all. Melanie. Hi. Bye. And